Music sucks, you know. The only good album ever is Asia by Steely Dan. And albums that are almost good. I Can't Buy a Thrill by Steely Dan. Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi music YouTuber. How's it going? Because this is the first video of the new year. And just like last year, we're doing the top 10 albums of the previous year. Sorry it's a little late. Genre January is still happening. It'll be out next week, but covering the top 10 albums. And before I talk about any releases, I listened to a whole bunch this year. Probably not the most. There are probably people out there who've listened to more albums from 2021 than I have. But I know that I crawled through black metal promotion and listened to like 100 plus of those. A lot of them sucked. Sorry, black metal promotion. But a lot of them were pretty good. And that's kind of a caveat I want to give straight up here, because there were a couple of those with under, I want to say 30,000 views. And that's how I'm going to gauge it next year, is if it has over 30,000 or 3,000, I don't remember what I set for myself, I'll listen to it. But this few, I won't listen to it. But the problem with that is I was trying to crawl through every single one this year. I failed because it's ridiculous. And some of them just sucked, so I got very demoralized. But a couple random ones, which I'm going to talk about today actually, were great and very unpopular, very slept on. So I just want to give a caveat straight up. I can't listen to everything that exists. For example, I never really listened to any Vaporwave, so I'm not going to tell you any Vaporwave from this year. There was a future funk album I listened to this year that was kind of similar to the Avalanches in sound, their first album. Didn't like it that much, but I could really see someone else liking it a lot. And it's really rare for me to be like, that's just not my taste in music, because that I feel like anyone even mildly interested in that genre would enjoy. But basically, I covered as much as I could. The only real albums I didn't cover this year were the new Sometimes I Might Be Introvert record, and I think like the Portal record, and Donda. Donda to me doesn't exist. That's my first dishonorable mention of the whole year. Donda doesn't exist. Kanye had it up. I was going to listen to it. Didn't get around to it because I'm a busy man. And then he made a deluxe edition, which rearranged the songs. And so it doesn't exist anymore. So that's the first dishonorable mention. Sorry for the cut there. The emotional toll of talking about Kanye in 2021 did a number of me. So needed a break. But mentions and dishonorable mentions. You love them if you watch me. And I love giving them because the music sucks. Music really sucks. So what were the dishonorable mentions this year? Well, first of all, I have a mention, Kektarock, however you pronounce it, Pale Swordsman. Now, this is a dishonorable mention, not because it's bad, but because it's not good enough. No shade to Pale Swordsman. I actually liked this album. I gave it like a 6 out of 10. Absolutely fine. But the fact that people shill it and shill it and shill it, it's like they're getting paid to support this man. It's like they're little girls for One Direction, like amount of forgiveness for this album. Let me tell you, the piano ballads on this album, which by the way, this is a black metal album. Piano ballads? Black metal? What? They're pretty bad. They're pretty bad. The closing track is terrible. The black metal tracks are pretty decent for what they are. The tone is beautiful. I love the guitar tone. Phenomenal stuff. But this album, so overrated. Like, you can take a scoop of it and you're like, plop, 8 out of 10 material. But how much of that is like good beyond that? So everyone just be quiet about it. And maybe next time you'll have an 8 out of 10 album. Hopefully. But now the real dishonorable mentions. Now the real bad albums. What's bad? Well, everything. But Olivia Rodrigo, Sour. I don't get it. I don't get how people are loving this album. And here's a call out to Rolling Stone. I doubt they're gonna watch my stuff. Your list for the albums of the year, garbage. Sour for number one, that's one of my worst albums of the year. Genuinely, this album is like creatively vapid, completely pigeonholed into one perspective, and it's of a teen girl who was in Bizarrevark and therefore has an inferiority complex. That's the only thing that's that interesting about this album. In terms of the songs, there are 3 on this album. There's the one where your friends are gay and you're wondering how they feel. Come on, like that literally is like the TikTok trend where the woman is like me in the 1960s when my black friend is being segregated against by police, and then she's like crying, and she's like a white woman crying, and it's like, 1, I'm sure you would have been racist back then, and 2, you're not the one with the issue. Someone else is really suffering there. I don't have any sympathy for you. But yeah, that song aside, the rest of it's just like, oh, I'm mad at my ex-boyfriend. It's like, dude, we all have exes. Like, it's not like a relatable thing, more as it's like, I've heard that. We don't need it again. I've dealt with it enough. Sure, there's like the weird sludge track, like where it's brutal out here. It's an opener, kind of interesting there, but like the rest of it's just so boring. Like, why would you care? It's and it just a snooze fest, a real snooze fest. Can Olivia Rodrigo, she can kind of sing. Can she come up with a great album? Gosh, if she makes a great album, I mean, I'm not going to eat my own words, but like I'll be very surprised and utterly thrilled. That would be one of the most base moves of all time, is that level of recovery. But Sour sucks. I'm sorry. Other bad albums this year, Cemetery, his album this year. I think he might have released more than one. I don't care. I did not care to listen to any more than this. Cemetery's music is bad. The production is terrible. Stealing the black metal aesthetic and giving it like the Swedish cloud rap mix sucks. It's just not good at all. Like the textures don't mix at all. The themes are terrible. The songwriting is some of the worst songwriting I've seen on anything. And the fact that Fantano gave it a 9 back in the day is, I don't think I've ever disagreed with him so much. Like, that's the only one where I'm like, your opinion is invalid. Like when he criticizes My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, by the way. Everyone knows that he did that, and everyone's just like, what are you talking about? And I love that album. That, I don't think it's Kanye's best. I don't even think it's the best of the year. That album to me is like 8 out of 10. Really good songs on it. Not bulletproof, but it's an excellent album. Fantano gave it a 6 because he critiqued this, that, and I'm like, those are all valid. Cemetery, I don't see any of it. I don't see anything good about this album. Listening to it at the time gave me such a hatred of humanity that an honorable mention came into fruition here. And I still don't know if that album's that good because it's a black metal album, and I felt so upset that this album was there. Also, Mr. Cemetery, stop shilling your music on Mew. We don't want to hear it. But what's the last dishonorable mention? I've mentioned this before, but the new Violet Cold album, Empire of Love. Here's the thing. I like Black Gaze. I have no issue with it. I've quite enjoyed some Black Gaze albums. I've raved about the Black Gaze chart I got way back in the day. I also called that chart not that good. But legitimately, I've never had a chart I've never been able to like scoop out a chart and just put it into my topsters just like that. Because, I mean, half those albums suck, but a lot of them are great. I like Black Gaze. I'm not going to be a black metal elitist and be like, if it's not true cult, it doesn't matter. I don't consider it like black metal, but I like it. Violet Cold is so bad. So bad. And I don't understand why people like it that much. I think they like it just because it's the album cover is like kind of ballsy, and they're like, whoa, it's so crazy and different. Calling this album like post rock is a mockery to like actual post rock, people that put their heart and soul into music here. This album sounds unearthly levels of terrible. It's like, how does it sound like poorly produced and still like plasticky? It's like they're dumping like high fructose corn syrup like down your throat and you can't breathe. This is like the UN punishing us. This is like getting microplastics in your lungs and being told to enjoy it. Sorry for the little schizo derailment there. But this album is so terrible. It literally sounds like Hatsune Miku is singing on several of these tracks because the production is so just terribly gross. The mood is all over the place. Just the songwriting is not there. Nothing about this album is appealing. It might be the worst album of the year. This or Cemetery. Not that I went out of my way to listen to bad music. I never really do that except if I'm doing a video for you guys. But wow, bad. And a lot of people like it. And if you like it, why? I'm not gonna like say you're wrong, but like, why do you like it? I don't get it. But it's enough of the bad albums. Other than these bad albums I'm about to mention. But honorable mentions, albums I enjoyed. First, I want to mention Malgoth, Glory Through Savagery. This was a war metal album that made some ripples this year. Music of Destruction has declared it his album of the year. I like it. I think the songs really blend together. None of them really point out in any specific way where I'm like, oh yeah, that's this one. That's like, what are you talking about? That's this song. It's kind of rare for like war metal to be like, yes, that iconic war metal track. Of course, you can think of like albums. It's actually not as unrelenting of an album as I thought it would be. A little bit of quieter moments, like occasionally a little bit of more ambient builds, which is totally fine. I enjoyed that. I think it's a great album. Just didn't get there for me. Next, Ustalost, Before the Glinting Spell on Vests. This is one of the members of Yellow Eyes, made a black metal project. I thought this album was really, really creative for black metal. It was atmospheric. In terms of bass work, probably the greatest bass playing I've heard on a black metal album. And that you'd probably think that would give it like a number 2 or higher spot on my list. But like black metal is very much not bass centric. It's very much more treble and like guitar centric. But it's like it was mixed in a way that sounded like a harpsichord at points. And also the clean vocals, I say clean, but they are edited in a really interesting way where it sounds like someone's speaking to you like from behind like a crystal wall. The imagery of this album was just fantastic. A lot of Yellow Eyes isms in terms of the atmosphere pulled through here, and I think it worked beautifully. A fantastic, fantastic album. Topaz Jones, Don't Go Telling Your Mama. I like this album a lot, but it's really the funk tracks rather than the more straightforward hip-hop tracks that I really like, because some of the beats are flames, but like the other ones I'm just like, they're kind of average. But overall, it's just a really satisfying album. Blade, The Fool. This album's like not actually like an honorable mention in terms of quality, but the fact that it's a new Blade album is like enough for me, so The Fool. Stormkeep, Tales of Other Time. This album is for nerds. Symphonic black metal in the traditional sense with some dungeon synth style stuff. Just nerd stuff. But I had a blast listening to it. If I listen to it again, might even appear on this list. But too nerdy. But I mean, if you don't enjoy it, then I don't know, man. That's your loss. Chance, self-titled. I didn't spell it right, but this is like this is a future funk album. I probably mentioned earlier. The thing is, it felt very much like it didn't appeal to me directly. Like a lot of the stuff there, I'm like, this is all cool and all. It's like funk adjacent, but like, because here's the thing, I don't like Avalanche's Since I Left You that much. I think it's like fine, but I think it wears its welcome so fast in terms of a gimmick, and there's really nothing that sets it apart in terms of what it delivers as a listening experience. Like when you think about all the samples, it's like, well, that's so cool that it's all this different stuff, but like as a final product, I'm just like, I don't get it, because it doesn't create anything that feels that much greater than the sum of its parts. This Chance album is exactly the same. It's that feature funk, kind of plunderphonics, little mix there. If you love Avalanches, you'll love this album. It's very similar. It's pretty creative, just not my thing. I want to mention Debonair by Horsey. This album is kind of Mr. Bungley, but a little more soft, I guess you could say. It's not like as crude and not as dirty sounding. A lot of really weird stuff. Like the song Lagoon compares a girl's body to a 10-pound bag of cream. Says they're lying next to each other like a spoon next to a spoon. The lyrics on this album are hilarious. The little prog isms make it feel like some kind of bizarre successor to Mr. Bungle and Steely Dan and, I don't know, Butthole Surfers probably. Completely a bizarre album, but it's totally fun. Excellent production too. Like Steely Dan's production during their day is Horsey's production now. The fact that this has any connection to punk is beyond me. The only reason it's not shown up on this list is the collaboration track with King Cruel. I was bored by it. Totally bored. But if you just cut that song out, the rest of the album is flames. Just spotless. I want to mention the new Ghost Bath album, kind of a metalcore kind of influence here, kind of groovy, and that kind of pulled me out of the experience. But in terms of DSBM, kind of adjacent black gaze, solid stuff. I mean, I really got with it. Passage by Yith. This was the album that Cemetery made me feel was so amazing. This album's very, honestly, creatively vapid. Like, nothing here that hasn't been done before, but it just works. Like, it's one of those things where you're like, you see the influences down to like the pixel, but you're just like, I can't dislike it because nothing here is bad. It's good. But honestly, the atmosphere is excellent, and the ambient track that closes it off is fantastic too. Really interesting concept for an album. Super cold stuff. I really loved it. Maybe it's not as generic as I was claiming before. I kind of exaggerate every once in a while, but loved it. Wolf Alice, Blue Weekend. This album would be on my top 10 if it wasn't for the first two tracks being so boring. They were boring. But if you just cut that out, the rest of it is heat all the way through. Like really interesting, like 80s popisms in a way that doesn't feel redundant, especially in our modern era. The Ruins of Beveras with the Thule Grimoires. I thought this had a chance of being my album of the year, but Ruins of Beveras is known as being like a legendary black and doom metal project from Germany with a lot of really interesting album concepts. Fantastic critical acclaim. Like everyone loves them, and I love this album too. Really long songs, really interesting concepts about like Hyperboreans and stuff. Kind of like right-wing Agartha feel, but like I've got no reason to believe that this is like politically offensive in any way, shape, or form. Really bizarre stuff, really crushingly huge sound here. Really interesting album. If you're aching for another black metal release this year beyond all the ones that I've mentioned in this video so far and after this one, this is totally a contender for you to listen to. Hannah Peel, Fur Wave. This was an electronic sort of somewhat ambient piece here, kind of IDM stuff. Really beautiful stuff. Never gripped me that much, but everything on here was pretty great, and it was just a beautiful record overall. The new Godspeed You Black Emperor, beautiful record. A real return to form for the band. Totally approaching my top 10s here, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Honestly, like I got really hooked into it, and it's just gorgeous. The hooks and the all the riffs are just so uplifting. Surprisingly, an uplifting album for Godspeed's themes, but I totally dug it and still dig it. Go listen to it. Blank Mass, Inferno, another album of the year contender before I did this list. And giant 2-part 1-track IDM behemoth here. If there is a single album on this list that demands attention during a listen, it's probably this one. Between the various like field recording samples, the death industrial noise bits, and the like the sort of like more poppy bits, all are interwoven in an insanely beautiful way. conceptually super uplifting. Feels like a Godspeed You Black Emperor album in electronic form, and I really mean that. Go listen to it, please. This is one of like 5 albums on here where I'm like, vinyl is essential. Like this one, if I had a record player myself, actually I could use my roommates, so I might actually buy this one for vinyl. Merzbow, Triwave Pagoda. Yup. It was that good. Textures were off the wall. Atmosphere was insane. The energy behind this whole thing was just nuts. I could dance to this album. It's no Harsh Noise, by the way. If you don't know Merzbow, Harsh Noise, I could dance this album. Groovy, like really cool, like grinding sounds. I mean, you kind of want to like play on a lower volume and then immediately rise it because it's Merzbow. It starts loud, starts proud, starts vegan, but just the most intense grinding spaceship flying stuff. And the best part about this album, if you read its description on Bandcamp, it is in fact the soundtrack to the award-winning game Among Us. Najul Nasksul with the album Urkala. This is a second wave Australian black metal band, and they made a really scary black metal album, really oppressive atmospheres, and every song felt pretty unique too, especially for what it was going for. One of the best black metal albums of the year, and I guess no cigar when it comes to this list. Didn't crack the top 10, but honestly a very fantastic listen, very gripping, especially for its short track length. But every track here is just amazing. The Merzbow and Prurient collab, I'm going to tell you straight up, this and the next album just missed the top 10. This album I thought was going to be in my top 10. I was really like arguing with myself. I'm like, I can't give Merzbow number 1 of the whole year. The dude releases like 20 albums a year at least. I was just like, come on, I can't do that. But he collaborated with Prurient for one of the most emotionally gratifying and soul-crushing albums I have heard this whole year, including albums outside of this year. I was listening to Amnesiac by Radiohead today, and they about match in terms of soul-crushingness. What this album is overall is this 2-part album with two different tracks. The first side being more Prurient based, the second part being more Merzbow based, and the first part being like this outsider look at just the modern era in metropolises with cyborg people just screaming their nights away in complete and total agony because of the sort of like post-industrial landscape. I guess like the logical conclusion to capitalism as we know it, and especially in our current geopolitical climate, where things move so fast and things in other countries don't even matter anymore because all your money goes somewhere else and you're essentially owned by your government. Schizo posting, but emotionally gratifying piece here. And then the second track, sort of like you break. It's just you break. It's Merzbow more oriented, and in terms of the track listing here, it's so much more gratifying this way because I don't know how well it would do on its own. I'd say the reason this is at the number 12 spot here rather than cracking the number 10 is because this track here doesn't hit you with the emotion as much. It can't stand alone like the first part can, but as a conclusion to the album, it's very gratifying. Just the whole concept here is so beautiful. I've never heard a noise album really go the distance and really pull a concept out so well. And number 11, Reverorum Ibmalakt, Svagi Doden. I couldn't bring myself to give it a top 10 spot. I really wanted to, but it just didn't get there. And funnily enough, it's not even the highest black metal album of the year. There are a few black metal albums that are on my top 10. It's good. I really, really like it. But in terms of the quality of this album, the fourth track is by far the best one, and that kind of makes me feel a little weird about the quality of it as a whole. But I think if this was all like cranked to a really loud volume, the effect would pass much better. And I think that's another thing to consider in terms of album quality, is that some things you cannot listen to quietly. This is not an album you can listen to quietly. The second half of the album, you can, just because the dynamism is so much there. But the first half is much more percussive and thunderous, and it really needs that presence. And playing it at a low volume, which I guess my computer can only do now, just doesn't do it. Love this album, though. Great album. Conceptually amazing, and I'm probably going to review potentially the entire discography of this band at some point. They're so enigmatic and interesting, but just wanted to mention that. One last thing before I get into the proper top 10, as I want to say every album that I mentioned is great, is worth a listen today. I mean, I really want to get you guys into as much music as possible. And I mean, sometimes like Fantano doesn't talk about some of this stuff. Sometimes, I don't know, Alpha Media, whoever you watch, doesn't talk about this stuff. Deep Cuts, his recommendations are almost always fire. So I could just tell you, I mean, watch Oliver, but I want to get you into more stuff. And I really hope you like these. But more than that, I like them. So here they are.
A 10.
Number 10 is a pretty personal connection for me, just because I just emotions have been high this year. So this album really is one of those that like is uplifting in a way that's also sort of acknowledges struggle, I guess you could say. This is Nurture by Porter Robinson. In terms of like a shoegazy, glitchy album this year, I like this a lot more than the Sweet Trip release. I thought this thing was so consistent. The only flaw was that the track list, really, I wish it would have been switched out around a little bit, but I think that every track on here is so amazing. The ambient sort of wind tempos track is so interesting, and the way it grows is so unique. It kind of reminds me of Gek 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 by 100 Gex, but less dense and more spacey, and really just a bit more fulfilling even. And I think the rest of this album's amazing too. That opening track, Look at the Sky, past the intro track, is so wonderful and an amazing opener. Probably maybe my favorite opener this year. Just a fantastic album overall. Really uplifting electronic work here. The vocals are all amazing. And it's one of the simplest albums I'm saying today in terms of themes and lyrics, but the lyrics are beautiful anyways. They're very poetic. The imagery it paints is so wonderful, and the whole atmosphere of this album, it's so nice, and it's really like a one-of-a-kind atmosphere, truly an experience that I believe everyone should have.
A number 9 large.
Number 9, R.A.P. Ferreira in Scallops Hotel with Bob's Son. This is one of the most slept on albums of the year. Absolutely. And R.I.P. Ferreira made another album this year, which I forgot its name, but it was incredible. Very good. But this album is really where it came into its own. This album to me is like a successor to Cloud Dead. If you don't like Cloud Dead, like, get out of here. That album's fantastic. But this is like a more condensed, conceptually aware, upfront version of Cloud Dead that is just as satisfying and in a way demands re-listen just as much as Cloud Dead, where Cloud Dead, understanding it because there's such a thick barrier of sound that you have to peel back layer by layer. Instead, Bob's Son here conceptually is amazing. Half of the stuff I will never get, and the atmosphere of this album is so unique because everything about it just screams cool. He's saying some of his lyrics are super random, and yet it's just, you're just like, wow, that fits so perfectly. The imagery he paints is fantastic. His chill style, like flow, just really gives you this idea of like, I don't care. And the fact that he compares himself to Diogenes in the song that's about Diogenes is one, I mean, everyone's favorite philosopher, Diogenes, like, what's not to love? But the philosophical commentary there is amazing. This is one of those albums this year that is so smart that it's going to demand re-listens just because I don't understand it all yet. It's very intelligent. The lyrics have never let me down. And the alter ego of R.A.P. Ferreira, Scallops Hotel, really brought his A game for the beats as well, because some of these are more chill and you just sort of lie back. It all feels soft, like rather soft sounding, but some of them are just they're so hard. Like, you instantly like really get into it, and it's like, it sounds so funky, and yet it's not that aggressive, not that noisy, rather tame sounding and yet so unique. Whether it's a sample of like a jazz piece or a like Game Boy crushed version of a snare drum being the only beat, everything here sounds phenomenal in any context. Conceptually, sonically, amazing release. Don't sleep on it. Number 8. This is one of those black metal albums that I felt like black metal promotion should have shilled a bit more because they posted it, and it's not one of those albums that really got acknowledged as much. This is Wrath by Zari Wilk. The album cover is a bit of a filter, much like Thule Grimoires that I mentioned earlier. What happens in this album is so unique. It's a raw Polish black metal album, and it feels kind of outside at the same time. It's got the same premise in terms of like sonic quality as maybe your Philosophem, early Immortal, some early Gorgoroth even, raw black metal, and yet the approach is slightly different. The songs here aren't that distinguishable, except some of them are more aggressive than the others. The emotional variety, I guess, is really where the diversity in the tracks here comes out, where some of them feel like more bitter, sort of in a malicious sense. Some of them are more tame and like almost like in a dormant state, and yet they all feel so sour and bitter. The raw style riffs are very gripping. The production is amazing throughout, and the vocals are very unique because it's sort of like this yelly, like wretched vocal style, which feels it's hard to explain. But on one hand, it's a bit amateurish, but on the other hand, it feels so much more believable. Emotionally, it's perfect with the vocals. Fantastic album. I really hope you guys enjoy that one. And number 7 is about this. No, it's not about Lana Del Rey. Please don't mention Lana Del Rey. But it's about Minnesota. Guys, come on, Minnesota. It's a Minnesota. Come on, you get it. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. I've become impervious to any criticism after Xander ruined my life during the Burzum review. I don't even drink Pepsi, but I enjoy CM Punk's work in the WWE, so I'll probably have to drink that later. But this is Panopticon's new album, And Again Into the Light, another classic from Panopticon. Between the Americana folk bits and the crushing black metal stuff, it is a diverse and fantastic release. And this is kind of one that I think that the black metal elitists will really get with, because the production is a bit more raw than you would probably expect from the new wave of like hipstery black metal that's been plaguing the scene for as long as it's been plaguing it, which is such a shame. But this one sounds truly awesome. In a way, in one hand, it's this big cascade of sound, not cascading black metal. Don't come at me with Wolves in the Throne Room. Their album is not near this list. But you got this amazing thunderous sound, and on some hands you got like this dark space style, like chuggy lower end style of guitar riffs. The vocals are very aggressive, and the clean vocals are amazing too. The track The Embers at Dawn is one of the most successful sort of melancholic style black metal tracks I've ever heard, because it's got like this half like folky bit and like half of like the more black metal stuff. And the progression is so fantastic because it doesn't start out at 100. It's got like the folky Americana bit with amazing acoustic guitar work, and then it thickens up in the middle with some of the most aggressive sounds ever. It's really filled with so much anguish and regret. Some really nice feelings that accompany the black metal style excellently. Being at about an hour and 11 minutes in length, it's a bit long, but every second here is totally fulfilling. And the fact that it's about Minnesota, well, does nothing for me. But I mean, it's another geographical location, I believe, that the boys in Panopticon sculpted perfectly with these swampy imageries and these bird samples that I think I remember were on the album, but it could just be one of the percussive instruments. And the production style and the fact that I'm slowly losing it. Keep in mind, I'm a Dr. Pepper supporter in this household. I got these for our friend Andy, who apparently likes Pepsi, but it turns out he doesn't even like Pepsi that much, so it's a waste of my time. Since I didn't have anything progressive this year in my top 10 list, I thought maybe there's something further in my roots that I really appreciated this year, and there was. And more than just a little bit of appreciation for this album, because this is Okay Human by Weezer. Yeah, I'm serious, dead serious. This thing is incredible. First of all, this is one of the greatest stylistic shifts a band has made in such a long time that it's actually hilarious how effective this thing is. Because Weezer took their typical like sort of pop rock slight alt sound with a dash of emo every once in a while for chamber pop, baroque pop with really thick orchestral backgrounds and Steely Dan levels of hi-fi production here, because every little like microtone comes through so perfectly that it's so gorgeous. There isn't a second of this thing that I'm not like loving how it sounds. It's probably like the most hi-fi record that I love this year, and it's easily the most popular record out there that I like this year, because I mean I'm not a pop optimist, I don't get with stuff that easily, but this thing is really, really intelligent. It's a really big work of art here. It combines a lot of themes of like death and mortality, especially in times like these, with getting old and like losing vision of what you're able to do and even who you are, which for Rivers Cuomo is, I guess, nothing new. But I want to say that like even though Rivers has had a lot of albums displaying confidence post Pinkerton, I say this because Rivers really is like, I feel like he's the main brain of Weezer, and because I mean he writes everything. But like here, like even though you've had albums like Red, which had like delusions of grandeur, that album's like super fun, and at least it has confidence, so you can sort of take comfort in that, or solace rather. And albums like Black Album have that too. There are only a couple of real times where you might feel Weezer really came into their own sound and really just made a rock album that conquered some serious themes and did it in a way that was effective, and they really balanced everything perfectly well. In my opinion, that's probably Everything Will Be Alright in the End that does that most perfectly, because songs like Foolish Father, the whole like trio of tracks that ends it off, is a really cool concept too. A couple bits aren't perfect on that album, but then here we got Okay Human, which after like a pretty spotty album listing, of course, like not every album's perfect, you got this huge left turn. And it's all about how much, like, this is everything he wanted to do since Pinkerton, because like Pinkerton talks so much about like 3-chord songs and how he's like not fulfilling what he wants to do. This is really like the opposite of Blue Album here. It's much more conceptual, a little harder to get into. I guess it's not that hard to get into. It's still like pop music, but like it flows so well. Every song goes into the next. The themes are all like really hard hitting. Like Blue Album, only like a couple of tracks really hit your emotions that hard. Well, I feel like Blue Album got lucky. I feel like Okay Human is truly Rivers' like intelligent peak here. I feel like this is him learning, and he never got lucky once for this album. It's just, he just nailed it on the head, and he got the themes perfectly. Every song in here is perfect. All the different textures are amazing. Can I talk about the drums? I'm dying to talk about the drums because they sound fantastic. The snare sound is like, I don't think I'd ever describe a snare as like beautiful, but here it's beautiful. The bass comes through so perfectly. Rivers' singing is great. The sort of like approach to these songs here ranges from like sardonic, like slightly comedic in a couple of tracks, and like satirical, to even like these beautiful, like simple, like domestic pictures that he paints of like him and his wife, just doing something silly. And like there's the one song, I'm forgetting its name. I think it's Alu Gobi, where it's like it paints like how dreary dating can be after like doing the same thing over and over. But like in the concept of an album as a whole, it's so perfect because it's so much like, oh, I really miss the stupid like redundant things that we did, which is kind of like Blue in a way where with the 2-track run, the second and the third track, where there's a song about Rivers being like super sexist, which is like a satire, or I guess really just a prelude to the next song where it's like, don't be sexist or your girlfriend will leave you, most likely. But basically, this album is so beautiful, and also the connections to California really hit me personally. And as someone who's experienced not everything Rivers has, but like I mean, of course, like I don't want to get too personal, but of course I have feelings of self-doubt. Of course I have thoughts that I can never do what I want to do. I have thoughts that I've messed everything up and that nothing's gone perfectly. But like, I mean, I'm holding on to like some hope, just as Rivers does. I find a lot of connection with Rivers Cuomo. I think he's just a beautiful songwriter, and really this is one of Weezer's best albums. I'd say top 3 easily, and its quality is truly like unmatched, and this is a real shock to everybody how good this album is. So I highly encourage you to give it a listen yourself. And of course, this new Cynic album is good too. I actually kind of love it. It's not on this list, but I feel like I have to include it because of the bit.
Countdown backwards. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
12 is your answer. Which number comes between 4 and 6?
4 and 6 and 4 and 5.
Number 5, we have a band member I've mentioned before, Orphan Donor with Unraveled. This is a screamo project with the one and only Chris Pandolfo from Clouds Collide on vocals for this band here, and he brings it again with the highly emotional performance on the vocals. His vocals are amazing, but what's also amazing is the instrumentation on every single track here. The concepts of grieving and rage are throughout this whole thing. You've got some really feelings that I guess you could associate with toxicity in the grieving process, where you might be angry at loved ones or people surrounding you. A very personal sounding album here, and one that goes through every stage of mania and depression and some serious highs and lows, mostly lows, but everything about it is just so amazing. The crunchy sound of this whole thing is just so pummeling. You feel like you're in the same room as this guy as he's just having the worst breakdown of his life. It's so rare for like a screamo album to appeal to me this much, but like it's so gratifying. And the final track is really long, but every second works perfectly. It's like this wonderful minimalist dive down from the crushed up, like pummeling instrumentation before. And it's the same instruments, but like it just dwindles down to a much more minimalist approach. And it's like you just threw like your room into bits, and you're just like realizing like all the damage you just did. And it's a really introspective album here. You're gonna feel a lot of things in it, and oddly enough, I got these feelings of grievance without looking at the lyrics at all, because I actually still don't know the lyrics. But like, I mean, I actually asked Chris himself about the lyrics and who wrote it, and he did confirm these feelings of grievance. But I could just tell, which really goes to length about the songwriting, the band, and their compositions as a whole. So good. Another sleeper hit of the year. And I really mean that. I hope you guys enjoy this album. Number 4. Speaking of grieving, Injury Reserve. By the time I get to Phoenix, with the death of one of the members of Injury Reserve, they took some of his vocal passages that remained and made a killer album, and my experimental hip-hop album of the year for sure, and I believe my hip-hop album of the year, if I remember correctly. I say remember like I don't have a Google Doc with all my notes, but this album is truly phenomenal. It's sort of got the same abstract concepts and deliveries that R.A.P. Ferreira had earlier on this list, but with really hi-fi, futuristic production here. And it sort of combines themes of like grieving of like a recent loss and like a realization of impending doom for all of us. A lot of interesting themes of natural destruction, a lot of interesting themes of death, of course, and some really more personal ideas too. Like seeing like Netflix recommendations for someone who's not there anymore, and yet delivered in such a like brutal, like modern way where it's like it's just so crushing. I wish I could like explain it all without getting a little emotional here, but like you really feel like you're here. I mean, I guess the only thing keeping this from being higher in the list is the fact that 2 tracks really shine through here as the highlights. One, Superman That, with this destroyed, like utterly like eviscerated, obliterated beat that is sewn together in Frankenstein into this monster of this rolling just beat of like several different samples, and then these vocals are like yelled out over the top. They start like in this croon, and they're just auto-tuned in this way that's just such this screech. Fantastic. And then the closing song just feels like such an epic conclusion, and after like all this like is said and done in like a modern era where everything could feel like crashing down on you at once, sometimes you just gotta acknowledge like the little things in your life and see like these personal things really do like, I know like it's common to be like a nihilist nowadays, like even though it's we can get into like whether or not Nietzsche actually was a nihilist. I mean, he wasn't, but you got people who like suddenly think about nothing matters and stuff like that, but then you're really brought to face the facts because someone close to you, something really bad happens to them, and it clicks you back in. And after time, if the song feels like there's time for grieving in between it, and then you really just kind of have to go through the phases of acceptance. Beautiful record. I'm sure I've made that clear, but just a phenomenal record, and it goes through a lot of interesting phases too, of paranoia and mania, depression. Like I mentioned on the Orphan Donor record, I guess it is kind of a experimental hip hop version of that. Fantastic album. Number 3, this is Grima with Rotten Garden, another black metal project. This is from Naturmacht Productions, I guess. They're a black metal production company, or label, rather. Sorry, film. I tried listening to this label's other material this year. There's one album I reviewed in a document I'll be mentioning after I finish the top 10. But this album really was better than the other ones that I heard. This one was a really interesting, sort of like semi-symphonic, like really atmospheric piece of black metal here. Really beautiful black metal. One that conceptually I really need to dive further into because it's so interesting. The textures on this thing overall are so interesting because they just sort of switch between all these different stuff. The riffs are gripping every single time. Not that much else to say about it except that the atmosphere is set perfectly. This is my black metal album of the year, Rotten Garden by Grima. Fantastic thing here. Really cool nature sounds. I really just experience it for yourself because you'll get what I mean. Number 2, a real upstart that I don't know where I found this album, but one day I think I just saw it in my Spotify recommendations and I was like, I guess it's gonna be something I listened to this year. This is Illudium with Ash of the Womb. A really interesting album conceptually, one of those albums that is so smart that I'm really gonna need to take a few more listens because it's not popular enough to get on Genius and get like a proper breakdown. But what is this thing? This is a post-rock doom metal dreamgaze shoegaze album from sort of a Cascadian California region. We got this interesting new band that I've never heard of before listening to this album, with a lot of interesting influences of blues music, metal, doom metal particularly, and yet it sounds so beautiful. In a way, this is like Lantloss and Melting Sun if it was a lot more negative, less like someone drifting off, and a lot more like ground. In a weird way, Melting Sun, even though the themes are rather sad, it feels like a happier record. And that sort of album represents like the sky and the sun, but Ash of the Womb feels so grounded to the earth with all like these grinding, doomy textures of everything shifting around. It really feels like you're connected. And the title of the album itself, I forget what her name is, but one of the members of Illudium went and said how this is about the dichotomy between life and death, because Ash of the Womb is like you have Ash, which is the end of life, and the womb, which is the very, very beginning. Very interesting concepts here. Every song structure here, by the way, is phenomenal. It goes through these amazing arcs of like destruction, and you will never hear a better clean guitar sound in your life. Sounds so fine, so good. This album sounds amazing, and this particular buzz when the distortion kicks in, I don't know what they did. Did you guys get like a life pedal or something, some like crazy expensive like drone metal style pedal, because it's so thick and amazing. This is so good. I love it a lot. Please listen to it. Chungus imprisoning me. All that eyes. Yeah, you guys get it. Number one, I will admit, me placing this here is a little disappointing because if you know my tastes, you might have seen this coming. This is a lot. This has been on everyone's list, and I hate that it is on everyone's list because I would have rather given it to Ash of the Womb. But this band deserved it. They did. In fact, they deserved it in 2018 too, when they made Double Negative. And Fantano gave it a Why Now review. That album is very interesting, very open-ended, very abstract, and very gorgeous overall. But if you take those same instrumentations and you mix them around a little bit, you give it a little more energy in progression that is a little bit more engaging, but less sort of like shocking to hear, feels less revolutionary, because they knew on this Double Negative that what you were hearing was new. What you were hearing was very interesting. And it was this interesting warping sound, really lush and glitchy, and it used all these crazy, crazy sounds to build the instrumentation off of that was shocking. And it takes a lot of those similar production ideas and makes, I guess, a pop record out of it, sort of like a slowcore stuff. This is, of course, Hey What by Low. Before I continue, I don't know if this is better than Double Negative. I own Double Negative. I love that record, and I love this record too. This is my album of the year, but that might be my album of 2018. There are some contenders, but man, Hey What is so cool because the progression of every single song pays off in spades every single time, whether it's a shorter cut and it morphs rather quickly into just this grand, lush, like vibrant, like beam of sunlight, or the song Hey that just drones out with these so beautiful vocals. I don't know what these two people are doing to keep their voices this amazing this late into their career, but fantastic. I think Low is one of those bands, those rare bands that holds up after a long time, and their level of quality backs up how revolutionary they are. There are a lot of bands out there that are revolutionary that I think really don't have a level of quality. Like, there are a few examples of bands out there that I think revolutionize a sound but don't have the quality to back it up. For example, Venom for black metal. First, like, I guess, extreme metal band, one of the first extreme metal bands, first black metal band, I guess first wave black metal band, if you want to be like that. They're not the cream of the crop of the genre. But meanwhile, you look at Low here, weird distinction, I know, and everything they do is revolution. They start a whole new thing instantly. Everyone loves it. They're the highlight of the genre, and they've done that for several genres. They did that for slowcore. They've probably influenced indie and post-rock. They've definitely influenced like more experimental sides of like shoegaze adjacent genres that the poptimists that make shoegaze probably aren't familiar with. And yet over the past like decade or so, they've been making more electronically tinged stuff with these really interesting soundscapes that no one has touched before. I mean, I see stuff like Spirit of the Beehive cover it, but they're not even close to the level of quality and emotional gratification that goes through on every track here. Also, this album is so thematically complex that it's baffling. It's really interesting themes of like romance and like interaction with people, and I guess a lot of things that are like post-pandemic, I guess you could say. If there's any album on this list that you want to suck up every detail, it's this one. I just want to pick out every little note, every little microtonal difference that happens in this album and appreciate it, because everything here is so beautiful and amazing. Really, really phenomenal album. Gosh, I wish I could explain more about this band now, but I think this album probably deserves like a full review at some point. But that is my list. Little announcement. I will include a PDF down below probably. If not, I'll include it on Discord of every album I listened to in 2021. I kept it on one big document and I reviewed them all there with a numerical rating system and some symbols for some further stuff there. And you can see that like the 9 out of 10s I switched around for this video in particular. I won't include any other notes on that. Last time I really edited that page was like about a month ago with a couple extra albums written that are like things I plan to review. But that I just wanted to include that there and mention that that's what's happening. But I'm really excited for 2022. I'm so excited for some more music. I know there's going to be some good stuff this year. If you guys have any questions about anything I mentioned or didn't mention, feel free to ask below. Good chance I listened to what you listened to. I only mentioned like a couple albums today that I haven't listened to, but most likely a popular album that you mentioned I've listened to. Like, just go ahead and ask me, or in my Discord. Speaking of, go ahead and join my Discord. I'll post that down below as well. But what were your guys' top 10 albums of the year? I'm really curious because I want to check out what you guys listen to. That's about it. Go ahead and check my social medias below. I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. Happy New Year. First new video of this little space here. This is the same place I've recorded a lot of videos before, so don't think I'm switching around that often. But I really appreciate you guys. We just hit 170 subscribers too, which is really fulfilling to me in a lot of ways. Thank you guys so much for the support so far. Stay based out there, because I need you to do that by watching me, because I rub off on you and definitely give you healthy ways to view your government and what you should mail to them. But hope you guys are doing well. Liking and subscribing would be appreciated. Have a good one. Bye.